Okay, so here we are, the second to last chapter, and what we'll be doing here, of course, is conservation planning. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, there is a lot of management speak in this chapter, um, but because of what it is, it's basically management, right? So it really is um, valuable despite kind of the buzzwordy nature of a lot of it. Um, Basically, the idea here is, uh, I'll just I'll put this up here. Skip ahead. It's not a long video, but if you want to see where we're going, this is where we're going. Um, Basically, the idea here is that conservation planning, or planning in general, throughout this course, is a combination of two things: theory, which is what you're going to get in, say, the biology courses here. So you take ecology with me in the spring, fall, whenever we offer it again. I don't remember. Um, you'll learn a lot of the theory, but here in the ENVS courses, such as this one, this is where you'll start to really begin to put the practice half of this in play. And you can't do one without the other, right? Theory on its own is not particularly useful. Practice without theory is pointless. And as a manager, what you're going to find is that, and this goes back to the very first day of class, right? Aldo Leopold, wildlife management is an art, right? It is very much a creative process. And that creative process is enriched when we've got both people that have been doing it for a while and people that are new to the field, right? As you gain experience, typically you lose inspiration. And so you, as a freshly minted wildlife management person, would have a ton of this and not so much of this. All right, so again, we'll talk about this being a team effort. This is a big part of why. There can be structure, there can be relatively unstructured management plans. Really, there's no one right answer here because it is such a creative process. It's kind of fitting your experience and your gut feeling and your background knowledge to every specific problem at hand, right? In layman's terms, then, I guess, it's basically, what do we have? What do we want? How do we get from here to there, right? Now, dictionary definition here, right? Deliberate social or organizational activity of developing an optimal strategy for solving problems and achieving a desired set of objectives. Wow, that is totally useless, right? Basically, the idea here is just setting a plan, putting it in action, right? Very much a problem solving kind of exercise. Now, it's also, I would say, definitely group activity, right? I know we all love those, but particularly as we get larger and larger in scale, you're going to pull in more and more agencies, more and more stakeholders. You yourself, as part of a management team, are going to be working with other people. And so being able to work with other people, being able to understand multiple approaches to the same problem, we'll see an example of that in a couple of slides. And most importantly here, the understanding that whatever you do must be put into an adaptive framework. You are never done, right? All you have done once you reach the end of your plan is giving yourself more information to give the next plan some room to breathe. And the last thing here, this one might seem out of place, but it's really not. Future control. Basically, the idea is you want to future-proof your plans, right? You are all, of course, too young to remember this, but when I was your age, the year was 1999. We were approaching the year 2000, right? And so there was, believe it or not, although I guess now probably more believable than it would have been 6 months ago, with people hoarding toilet paper and drinking bleach and whatever else. People were absolutely terrified that come the year 2000 that the world would shut down. And the reason for this was that computers at this point used 2 digits to represent the year, right? Which is fine from 1900 to 1999, but when you turn to year 2000, the computer doesn't see a difference between 2000, which is 00, and 1900, which is 00. And people thought like banks were gonna explode, not like literally explode, but like figuratively explode. Planes were going to drop out of the sky, literally drop out of the sky. Um, Mass hysteria, right? When we set up all of our MS-DOS based things, we hadn't future-proofed them, right? So your plans need to be future-proofed in a better way than that. Now this is straight out of some annoying management seminar here, but it is really valuable to you, even if the specific wording of this stuff is not that important. What I want you to take away from this here is the idea that the basis of whatever your plan is begins with vision and mission. Okay. Vision is basically, what are you aiming for, right? Are you aiming for a pristine meadow that was representative of what a meadow would have looked like before European contact? Are you aiming for a serviceable wetland that ducks can come in and land and hang out for a while on a migratory stop? You know, whatever. What is your vision? What is the, if things go to plan, what will the future look like, right? Mission, and you've all seen mission statements, and frankly, I find mission statements to be one of the most useless things in the universe, but bear in mind that everyone's got one. Basically, the mission statement is just basically saying, okay, well, what are who are the stakeholders? What are our outcomes? Who are we doing this for and why? Right? What's the value in what we're doing? Why restore the meadow? Why put in the wetland? Who's going to benefit out of this? That kind of stuff. And so this is important stuff, because this very much says, okay, these are where we're going, and these are the people we have to work with, right? And they set up the top two parts of the pyramid, the boots on the ground part of it, right? Goals and objectives. Goals are where you're going, right? So goal is we improve duck habitat, or we whatever, okay? So this is basically kind of the realization of what your vision is, okay? And objectives are what you're going to do to get there, right? They have to be quantifiable, right, for reasons we'll see in a second, but you have to be able to measure your objectives, right, the outcomes of your objectives. But they're basically, what are you going to do to get to your goals, okay? And there's no one way to do this, right? I keep saying this, but there's no one way to get there, right? So here's an example where I've got two different land managers, both given the same goal. They might have different sets of initial resources. They might have different sets of stakeholders to make happy, whatever, but they both have to accomplish the same thing. They need to take quail habitat, right, and make it better. Okay, so land manager one has three things in mind that they're going to do. They're going to burn 16 hectares in spring, and 16 hectares is a lot, right? But it's not an uncommon prescribed burn. And then they're going to go in and disc 4 hectares. So they're going to disc a quarter of that 16 hectares every year on a rotational basis. So if you don't know what disking is, disking, if you've ever seen like on a farm, like this implement on the front of the tractor they can put on there, that's got a bunch of these little sort of corkscrew like discs that spin and basically turn over the earth. That's what this is doing. Basically, it's tilling, okay? And so they're going to till a quarter of this every year. So they do 1/4 of it one year, they do the next quarter the next year, so on and so forth. And then the third objective is they're going to maintain brush piles. Okay, simple things. All of these things will help quail habitat, right? It'll make it better. Land Manager 2 is going to do none of those things. Land Manager 2 is going to do predator control, which may or may not be the most effective way to do things, as we've seen. They're going to plant food resources, which is kind of getting at what this is doing, but it's a little more specific in how they're doing it. And then the third thing they're going to do is they're going to try to remove invasive species and increase the proportion of native species, right? To bring it back to what quails would have adapted to. Right? Neither one is good, neither one is bad. They're both potentially successful plans, but they're very different, right? And again, that goes into knowing your property, knowing the people that you're working with, knowing your budget. Lots and lots of different ways that we can plan for things. The big challenge is the same big challenge we face every time. The more area, right, that we're working with in a sort of a map scale kind of a thing, the greater the territory we're working with, the more people we got to make happy, right? And that's not even necessarily just physically more people, but oftentimes it's more levels of red tape, right? You may be dealing with federal, state, local, and private people and all of their rules and regulations and all of their people to make happy. So it can be quite a pain in the ass. If you work across states or across jurisdictional bounds, sometimes you're going to find that part of your land, right, part of your area is heavily privatized and part of your area is heavily public. And so you have to work with two very different systems within there. In terms of more specific kinds of types of planning, right, at the Fed level, we expect, and the state level, legislation and policy. These are going to be things that govern how agencies work, right? What can you do? What can't you do? How much money do you have? Is there a push from the top down about what things to prioritize? All that kind of stuff. Those are going to govern what your agency does, and then your agency, in turn, tells you what to do. Right? Your boss says, this year we're managing for quail. So you go out and you figure out how to manage for quail, right? You may also be dealing with problems from above in terms of environmental regulations, right? So there may be a push for mitigation of, say, surface mining or strip mining, or maybe a disaster, natural and man-made, whatever, all that kind of stuff. One thing that we do to try to get private agencies, private citizens on board with a lot of stuff are things that are called incentive programs. These are tax breaks, these are financial rewards, these are all manner of different things to try to get people to stop ruining stuff, and if they've already ruined it, to fix it. All right. So conservation reserve, grassland reserve, wetland reserve, big one, wetland reserve program. Massively important thing. At state and federal levels, you know, obviously you get different kinds of planning programs there as well. Wildlife action plans, forest resource assessment strategy plans. These things at the state level tend to be a little more specific, right? They're telling you exactly, these are the things that we're going to try to do here in this particular place, here in this particular place, here in that particular place. Whereas your federal planning programs are more, I'm not trying to cross that out, I'm trying to circle it, are more broad brush, right? We are generally incentivizing these things. We are generally pushing for these activities in this general vicinity, the Midwest, the Northeast, stuff like that. So again, I want to stress the idea here that this is adaptive in all ways, shapes, and forms. You are never done. You are only done with one phase of your project. Okay. There's no start, there's no stop. You just kind of continue on until you get defunded or you die, right? Figure out what your project is, right? Who are your stakeholders? Who are the people you have to work with? Who are your agencies? How big is your problem? What things you're going to work on? Okay. Basically, right, this is where we start to think about vision and mission. And then we move on to goals, objectives, right? And here, as you set your goals and objectives, right, this is where you have to know the system you're working with, right? What can you, like, what are you likely to be able to actually do, right? I'd like to say kick BP off all of the platforms that they're drilling oil offshore. Can I do that? No, right? That's not a viable plan. It's not a viable goal. Okay. So you have to pick your battles, right? And part of picking your battles is sort of triage, right? What's most important, what's most at risk, right? Set your goals, your objectives, make sure that they're measurable, and figure out how you're going to measure them, okay? Then the fun part, you get out of the boardroom, you can stop talking to people in suits, and you can actually go out and do this shit, right? Figure out who's doing what and do it. And then, as you do that, right, you take your measurables, you measure them, and you decide, did I do a good job? Did I fail? Did I have a mixed bag, right? Did I win some of the time and lose some of the time? And if I won, why? And if I lost, why? And you take that information and you put it into your next 5-year or 1-year or 10-year or 6-month plan, and you begin all over again, right? So again, I want to stress this notion of you're never really done, right? You can only just make things a little bit better at a time, right? And learn from your mistakes, learn from your successes. Okay, don't be afraid to learn from this. Don't be afraid to learn from success too, right? Because that's as important as anything else. Okay. All right, so that's the second to last chapter, and then we got one more video ahead of place, and then we're all done for the year. So let's move on.